Welcome to Packt Deep Engineering's live interview with Francesco Ciulla. I'm Saqib Jan, Editor-in-Chief of Deep Engineering and your host for today's session. Really glad you're here. So whether you are actually evaluating Rust, already shipping it in production, or just curious about where the language is headed, this conversation definitely has something for you. I want to introduce Francesco Ciulla. Francesco Ciulla is a computer scientist and creator who publishes Rust and developer tooling content for a large technical audience online. He speaks internationally, has been recognized as a Docker captain, and has worked in developer relations for several years. Before that, he worked as a full stack developer at the European Space Agency on the Copernicus project. In December 2025, Francesco published his first technical book, the Rust Programming Handbook. It is a lens through which we will also approach a lot of today's conversation. Please join me in welcoming Francesco Ciulla. Francesco, great to have you.
Hey, can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
great. I'll just give you the floor. Maybe you could tell us a bit about the landscape. Also, in the landscape, you would cover a bit about Rust adoption at the organizational level, what actually it takes to introduce Rust with deep internal expertise. So help us what success looks for engineering teams and where the right trades-off are versus the wrong ones.
Yes, sure. By the way, hi everyone. Hi Dipayan. Hi everyone in the chat. I would like to see, since this is a virtual event, I would like to see people at least to type hi. Also, I can see you and I can see myself. So just let me know if this does work. So yes, I think Rust has been growing a lot in the past few years. And I'm happy that I started learning probably a bit earlier than everyone else. So I started creating content in 2023, and then I started working on this Rust Programming Handbook, shameless plug, it's here, in April 2023. So this took me about 2 years to publish, I would say. About the adoption of Rust at scale, there is the famous meme that rewrite things in Rust. But in every meme, there is a bit of truth. And I think the best approach, also for what I see in the industry, from a practical perspective, is not ideal to just rewrite everything in Rust, at least at the beginning. This would make me happy. But having one critical service to be rewritten in Rust, I don't know, it can be the login, it can be something that has a heavy load, or it's hard to process and so on. So I would say probably the best way to introduce Rust in a big project is to find, that hard part that, it's a bit slowing down, the bottleneck of your services, and trying to write one single service in Rust. That's the best way, I think, to approach it. And then you will see, probably slowly, Rust might take over your code base, but I mean this in a good sense.
Awesome. Francesco, there are some challenges also towards the adoption. Big organizations like Amazon have noted really the high cost and risk of adopting Rust without actually having internal expertise. And also the talent in this segment is quite also dry. So what advice do you give for engineering leaders planning to introduce Rust and also acquiring the right talent?
Yes, I don't know about this specific example. I don't know if you have one specific example to mention, but as for every new technology, of course, the problem is not the technology itself, is how the technology is known from the people in the organization. I remember when I was working at the European Space Agency, the Docker adoption was not that fast just because of Docker. It was not Docker's fault. It was because if a technology is new, it might be not well known as, I don't know, a Java backend or a Node.js application. So that's the bottleneck. So what's the best way there? The best way is to have a shepherd, so someone who can basically bring the real knowledge inside the application. So basically a mentor, a senior mentor, basically a senior Rust developer that already knows all the flows and maybe, basically a person that you can refer to in case. And especially I think in this AI era, where everyone, is writing stuff with AI, but you still need the validation. Like, okay, this rewrote this Rust service, but okay, now who decides if this is okay to put in production? Of course, you need the validation of an expert. So probably having at least one expert is the way to go. But this is not just about Rust. This is the golden rule of all the new technologies.
Definitely, yeah. But if you look at also the learning curve, it is quite steep. And Rust has a quite strict compiler, example the borrow checker, often causes newcomers of a period of deep soul searching. So from your experience, what's the best way for an experienced developer to learn to think in Rust? And also, it's an AI accelerated world right now. So what advice would you like to give for those who want to learn?
Yeah, sure. I think that this think that Rust is hard to learn is a myth. I also I made a talk at Rust Nation UK recently,
Mhm.
which was this provocatory title, which is Rust is not hard to learn. So feel free to fight me if you are in the chat, because this is a more like a myth that it has this steep curve. And I agree, but this quickly, I think it can be fixed, I would say, very long-term benefits. So it should not scare us to learning it. But what's the best way to learn it? Of course, there are the generic tips, about making
Mhm.
practice and so on. I will say that probably the best approach is to, first of all, be open-minded.
Yeah.
The problem of Rust is that since it has a unique way to handle memory, and of course I talk
Mhm.
about memory management in my book, even if you are a senior developer, even if you have 20 years of experience,
Mhm.
if you want to try to learn Rust, comparing it to other programming languages, you will fail, because it's like learning something which is completely new. And I think
Mhm.
especially for senior developers, the more experience you have, the more you think that you know everything, or at least you have a wide experience. So probably having to fight with the borrow checker, lifetime, the ownership concepts, it might
Mhm.
feel a bit overwhelming. But if you
Mhm.
are open-minded, you will get the full 100% power of Rust, and you will understand the reason why Rust exists and why many people are curious about this language. Rust has been voted as the most loved programming language. Loved means that the people who used it, they still want to use it. Rust is a sort of Teslas of
Mhm.
programming languages. So the people who used it, they
Mhm.
want to keep using it. So that's a great metric, because of course,
Yeah.
if you don't know something, you don't know. I can think about something that I never used, and I can have an opinion based, I don't know, what someone said on Twitter, what someone said on X, on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
But if I try something for real, they say,
Mhm.
maybe it's not that bad, or maybe this is bad. I have my own experience. I would rather trust who already used Rust compared to someone who had a bad experience. Usually I want to try things with my own hands, with my own eyes. I'm an engineer. I trust no one. I prefer to try things by myself.
Yeah, you knocked off two of my questions related to learning. Uh, it's very helpful, yeah, to think to have an open mind over here. Also, yeah, you did also mention about having its benefits, it being the Tesla of programming languages. In fact, experts do suggest adopting Rust when it offers an order of magnitude improvement for a problem, rather than using it indiscriminately. And so, I just want to ask you, from your engineering experience, what kind of projects or system components do you see Rust providing that 10x benefit?
So, like, which has the best project to use Rust for?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. I think Rust can be used in many projects. Maybe I'm a
Mhm.
bit biased, but I think that the projects where Rust really shines is where you
Mhm.
have real high performance issues. Sometimes it's not. So no,
Mhm.
sometimes it's not an issue. If I have just to scrape a website once a month, I think I would use
Mhm.
Python, because it's a great language, for example, to scrape websites. If you
Mhm.
need to serve 1 million users, I will use Rust hands down,
Mhm.
because I've used that in production. I can tell you that I tried this on my own. Rust web server in production on my PC, on my laptop, it uses 4 megabytes of RAM. In production, it uses 5 megabytes of RAM. So this does mean
Mhm.
that if you have a droplet with 1 gigabyte of RAM, you can have many, like 20, like 200 Rust services, of course, in idle. But this proves that if you have a service that consumes a lot of RAM, and we know that the RAMs usually has not
Mhm.
been the cheapest asset ever, maybe it's
Mhm.
worth it. No, especially for the APIs, because maybe on the front end, I think the front end, I'm a huge fan of WASM and all that stuff, but most of the
Mhm.
developers, they still use JavaScript frameworks and so on. So I
Mhm.
understand. But when it's
Mhm.
about an API, that's pure performance. That's pure.
Mhm.
Like really, really, nobody cares. The language your API is written in. So in that case, probably you have to convince me why you don't want to use Rust as an API. So I'm here. If someone is in the chat, they say, no, I don't want to use Rust as an API because, and then we can have a chat. But for sure, when we want high performances, also in terms of web, Rust has a huge advantage, even compared to famous like high performant language and technologies like, for example, Node.js. The problem with all these languages is that even Go, the languages who have a garbage collector, at some point they need to freeze, even for 200 milliseconds. If a user is unlucky, and it makes an HTTP request when the garbage collector starts, it will experience a higher latency. By not having garbage collector on the backend side, you basically have a flat latency. And this is great from terms of like if you know what I'm talking about, this is a huge benefit. You don't rely on luck or that the user will not be the unlucky one. Will basically is a problem that is removed. But slowly people will understand this. I remember me advocating for using Rust for web development in January 2024, and I got some people telling me, Francesco, you are crazy. Like, what do you mean? Instead, it was one of the reasons why I loved learning Rust, because I am a bit unpopular in this in the Rust ecosystem, because usually Rust is famous for being a system programming language. I think that Rust can be used for web development, and it can even be used to learn Rust, because if you know all the concepts for the web development, so you know the concept of CRUD API, the concepts of JSON Web Token, sessions, pagination, cookies, and so on, you can adapt these concepts, and basically it's just a matter of syntax. So it's the opposite. You know what the code does, and then you understand the Rust language, but you know what is that for? I don't know, get request, post request. So basically you use what you know to understand the Rust syntax. It's one of my favorite parts.
Interesting. You are far ahead. You're knocking off questions from the question that I had prepared for you. But I'm actually going to ask a
because
question.
I talk a lot.
It's because you know a lot. Yeah. But at the same time, I also want to ask questions before we actually again talk about a little bit about garbage collector and concurrency and also safety. I want to ask one question. When might Rust not be the right choice for a team, despite its lot of advantages?
Yes, so I should say never, because I should be biased for Rust, but I prefer to be honest. I want to be honest. So yes, there are some use cases when Rust is not ideal. So first of all, when you need something which is very simple and it needs to be done by yesterday, sometimes we have some huge dependencies. So if you're a junior developer, if you need to provide working API by today and you don't know Rust and you haven't watched my videos on about my book, probably that's not the best moment to learn Rust. So if you need fast prototyping, you are familiar already with Java, JavaScript, why don't you use it? When the deadline is so close, probably it's not the best way to try something new, because something will go wrong, especially if you're an expert. If you're not an expert, and, you can always refactor something later. So I would say, when you need something simple, and even in that case, probably AI can help you. If there are a million examples of using Node.js for a backend service, and you need something that you are sure, but that's more about your knowledge. It's not a Rust fault or Node.js fault. So as usual, when you need something that just works, you go with your most known technology. And also, as I mentioned, I think also sometimes, of course, I have to be honest here, the JavaScript ecosystem has more packages. Python ecosystem has better libraries for data science. So the ecosystem really matters in a programming language. And although Rust has a very good integration with the programming language, if you need something native, probably it's not the ideal choice, unless you're doing it for fun. So if you're doing it for fun, it's okay. Yes, there are some cases when Rust is not the ideal choice. This will make me sad, but it's fine.
Thank you for that clarity and honesty. Appreciate that. Now let's just let me circle back on concurrency and talk about memory safety a bit. So let's talk about safety versus speed. I mean, is Rust delivering? A Rust premise is memory safety without a garbage collector, and it seems to be paying off. Google observed drastically fewer memory bugs and even faster development iteration with Rust. From your perspective, are these kinds of benefits, safer code and productivity, common when using Rust?
Yes, they are, but I think that the productivity in Rust is not just about the typing speed. It might even be a bit slower because Rust is quite verbose in terms of programming language. You might like it or not. Some people like it. I think I like it because once I prefer to have something which is expressive instead of something super concise. I think that the biggest benefit in Rust is about the lack of the debugging depth. So you spend more time thinking up front, but you spend almost zero time chasing seg faults or memory leaks in production. And we always underestimate this part. We always talk about efficiency of the code, but if you need less time to debug your code, you're basically writing code. At the end of the day, you end up with more lines of code written or more logic written. And that's a part we know we all underestimate it because we just consider the time to just write the thing. And of course, now someone will say, okay, but we have AI that can write code for us. It's true, but we can use AI with any programming language. And I still think, and you can fight me if you don't agree, that Rust is probably one of the best, if not the best, programming language for AI because you will have the efficiency, but you also have the developer experience because we still need to touch the code after the AI generated it, or at least understand what the code has done. Otherwise, otherwise there is no difference from where we were copy-pasting boilerplate code from Stack Overflow. So there is no difference. We still have to understand what the code does. Otherwise, you have no control. If you have no control, either you are useless or you cause a problem. So in both cases, it's not a good time for you. So that's how I see it.
Yeah. And also, I mean, one of the biggest value here also for people using Rust is concurrency, right? I mean, Rust approach to concurrency, whether it's ownership and message passing versus garbage collected threads, it makes to make multi-threaded coding easier and less error prone. Now, do you find that Rust truly, just from your experience, tell us, because there might be people who might have questions, who might be hesitant a bit. What would you tell them how Rust enables that concurrency for actually teams?
Yes, sure. The first time that I learned concurrency was at the university, and it was It was concurrency in Java, and it was one of the last sessions of the course. It was feeling like so like something advanced. I also did the exam at the university like 20 years ago, so something might have changed. But my feeling is what it's okay. When you're doing concurrency, you're doing something advanced that you have to be careful. You have to use them like packages, and I think we all share this trauma, this experience when you have to write concurrency. Now, when I made my first video about concurrency in Rust, I was not scared, but let's say, okay, so this will be quite tough and advanced topic. I learned that I went live, I started making the example, and in 2 minutes I was done. So I had the opposite problem, like it was too easy, basically. And this is something that is true because Rust, since it's quite new, not like super new, but like it is when Rust existed, when Rust has been created, the first version 1.0, we already had many CPUs with multi-thread. Like it was not more like something crazy. So Rust has been created when concurrency and threads, it was already here. So this is an unfair advantage compared to a language which is 50 years old. I'm sorry. So this thing makes writing concurrency Rust like incredible. The term fearless concurrency means it means something. So, and also the fact that it prevents data races at compile time, it's basically a huge plus. So of course, concurrency will always require a bit of extra time, but especially now that we also have AI that can support us, you can ask, okay, write me some code that can write the 10 threads at the same time. So of course you need to know what I'm talking about. Of course you need to check my chapter about concurrency in my Rust book. But then once you have the basic knowledge and you know how it does work with messaging and you can send state and so on, I think you can have a way more efficient application. Because if you want to write application test concurrency, for sure you're not doing this for fun, or maybe yes, I don't know, but probably you want to do something that is more efficient. And if you can do something more efficient, but it takes you the 10 times more, it doesn't make sense. If you can make something efficient just with a bit more extra effort, then it's worth the effort, at least for me. So if I know, usually I have an approach that I don't write a concurrency application on the first prompt. Usually when you do concurrency, you do this when the application is already working and you want probably to use the memory in a better way. So this is my approach. And if doing this requires you just a few hours, just let's say one day if you want to take it easy, that's worth it. Because then if you spend, instead of $100 per month, you spend 20, say, okay, maybe it was worth my time, and it does make sense. If I have to fight for 3 weeks just to get a bit more efficiency, probably let's say you know what, I'll rather write another application, or rather spend more money on the server just to make the real approach, a real world approach. Of course, if we want to have fun, if nothing better to do than writing concurrency code during your weekend, I'm one of them, it's fine. But we are talking more about here real production grade applications.
Yeah, appreciate you elaborating on that. Thank you. And when we're talking about concurrency, we are actually headed into, we're talking about infrastructure territory. So just one question, maybe you can briefly talk about it. How does Rust concurrency, model hold up when you're building the kind of low-level networking components that traditionally, you could do in C, things like proxies, packet processors, or even kernel modules for that matter?
Yes. So about let's say all the underlying layer, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that also we have been written these things in C for a while. So I think in that case, probably we have for sure more repositories about C. But I think that also in Rust, I think now I've seen people like building protocols live. I still haven't done it, but probably I'll do it. So I think especially with the support of AI, this is becoming more possible and doable. So I think that we are going in a nice direction. And I think, and also in that part, which, famous, let's say, historically. Now we can say historically because we have been doing programming for a while, so we can talk about the history of programming. This has been the field of the C language and C and C++ language. Nobody was about to touch it. Just the fact that we are thinking that maybe there is an option to write these things, these low-level things in Rust, for me it's already a win. Just by the fact that we are, at least nobody ever thought about, let's say, okay, let's do this in JavaScript. Nobody ever even put the problem, because JavaScript is a high level programming language that is it's cool for when you need to do some sort of stuff. But at that level, you need efficiency. It's not an option anymore. You can say, let's decide the developer experience. Nobody cares about the developer experience when you have a networking protocol, right? You need the pure efficiency there. So only the languages that have a higher efficiency can deal with that. And I think that Rust is doing well. You know what I really like about Rust is that I think it's very readable. When you now have all these protocols and stuff, things becomes like super complicated so easily. And basically, you know the meme, when I wrote this code, just me and God knows it, and now only God knows it. So the fact that you can read actually this also tomorrow, for me, it's a great plus, especially when you have to deal with these low-level things. I think that there is a chance, of course. And I'm not that person who says, Rust will replace any C or any C++ language. Languages usually, if you think about that, everybody on Twitter is saying this is replacing this is replacing that. In the history of programming languages, there are very few languages that have been replaced or totally disappeared. Usually we just add more languages and add more applications. So Rust will not replace C. I'm a bit unpopular in this way, but I think that Rust, if you want to now write something in Rust low level, you can do it. That's a great option. At least we have an option. So if you want, just do it.
Any common pitfalls that you would like to highlight? Something developers should know, and probably also if you could briefly tell us how they can overcome them.
I wrote a whole chapter. I think it's 80 pages about pitfalls in the Rust. Probably now I can't remember half of them. I think some of the pitfalls. I think the number one is to think that Rust is similar to other languages. So if you try to write, nice mug by the way, I want it. If you want to write Rust language, if it was another language, probably you will have some problems. So I think the pitfall is trying to use Rust in the wrong way. So probably that's the biggest one. We can think about, I would like to know people from audience if you have some experience, some specific thing that happened to you. But I would say usually, I think the golden rule is to trust the compiler, especially at the beginning. So probably another pitfall is don't read the compiler and just trying to fix things on your own. And there are many, I would say. Now I have some ideas, but maybe we can leave this question open. So if you ever had some issues when you're programmed with Rust, otherwise I would say that that's it for now. But I have a long chapter that I wrote about any specific pitfalls on specific scenarios.
Yeah, great. But well, also let's talk about a little bit about managing complexity, like traits and types. Like Rust trait system and rich type semantics let us encode invariants in the type system for safety. But this power can also lead to a very complex code. And sometimes you might have seen the memes as well. Developers joke about spaghetti types where generics, lifetimes, and traits intertwine in opaque ways. So how would you probably how should an experienced architect balance using Rust, advanced type system versus keeping code simple?
Yeah, you know what? If you want to do something more advanced, you need to start using something which is more advanced. If you want to build rockets, you need to build more complex things. That's let's say what I would say. I think that the best way is to have a nice basic knowledge. So you need to know. You should not use traits without knowing what they are. And I think that the best way is to organize the code in a good way. I have again, the shameless plug. I have a chapter about how to manage files, how to organize them. Probably I think that Rust. I think that so far Rust has been the best language in terms of how I organize my code. So maybe if you're not familiar with the syntax, it might not be super familiar, especially at the beginning, especially for lifetime, in terms of how the code is organized, in terms of modules, files, and folders. Because yes, at some point you will stop writing all the code in a single file. That's a spoiler if you are new to programming. And then probably having things organized in modules, and then you import modules in the correct way is the right way to go. So I think that that's the best way to approach it. Honestly, I think that you can also write some sort of easy Rust code until a certain point. And then, of course, if you want to unlock the whole potential, if you want to write unsafe Rust and all the stuff, Rust allows you to remove seat belts and try to go full let's say raw power. But in that case, of course, you will have, I don't want to say a more complicated code, but probably a more complex code base. But this is normal, and it's common to basically all the programming languages. Usually the complexity of a project is always exponential. When you have in this project is simple, and then suddenly you have no idea what's going on anymore, because the complexity of a project, dependencies, and so on is exponential. So that's why having very well known of the basics can help you.
That's an interesting insight. Thank you. Let's move our conversation also towards web development and DevOps. More particularly, let's also focus on cloud native applications. Go, for that matter, is also one of the best programming languages. Kubernetes was built on Go. Let's just talk about Rust versus Go for microservices, right? Many teams default to Go, to prefer Golang for backend systems due to its simplicity and concurrency. On the other side, given Rust maturation, do you think Rust is ready to challenge Go in the web, backend space maybe?
Okay, so let's talk about this. By the way, it's funny how first, before we were talking about system programming, and you mentioned, of course, C. Now we are talking about the cloud and Docker. By the way, I have this battle, but this is by Docker. Docker is written in Go, so I would never say that Go is a bad programming language. But you see, can you feel here in the chat, and can you feel how powerful Rust is? Because we are talking about different complete different scenarios, and still Rust has something to say. Probably now, soon we will talk about web development, we'll talk about probably front-end, spoiler. You will say, can you use Rust compared to JavaScript? But can you see how versatile this programming language is basically fighting on all the sides. If we talk about front-end, probably nobody's thinking about using C to write a front-end. Maybe you can with AI, I have no idea. But you see, it's interesting how there is a language which is so versatile that can fight on different fields. And probably it's not the best in each of them, but it's at least rank 2 in all of them. So if I have a language which is rank 1, 2, 3 in all the fields, probably it's a language worth learning. So let's talk about the cloud. Do you want to talk about cloud microservices or web API?
I mean, microservices for that matter. Like,
For performance, you can fight me, but there is no story. So if you want to check the webs, don't trust me. Check benchmarks, check things. The comparison Rust versus Go is usually, let's say, there is no fight. I don't know why the people keep, they want to make Rust fight with Go, but just check it out and send me the link where Go is better than Rust. Sometimes they are at the same level. So in terms of pure performance, there is no story. In terms of finding Go engineers, probably at the moment is easier because probably there are more Go engineers than Rust. I'm not sure, but probably if I have to bet, probably there are more. So this might even be another reason to learn Rust, so there is less competition. But apart from that, probably having more engineers, it's easier to find probably a service which is written in Go. And I think Go really shines on CLIs and cloud, and as I mentioned, Docker is written in Go. So in terms of cloud, probably Go it should be the master. But and also, if you want to hire someone to write something, some service and so on, probably Go is the easiest way, but that's from a company perspective. I'm not talking to companies, I'm talking to developers. So probably, yes, if you have a company and if you want to hire someone, probably you will find a Go developer easier. But if you have a company, I'm talking to developers. So from the developer perspective, I would say probably the opposite. So I would rather be an expert in a language when there is less competition. I don't want to be in a place when there is more competition. But I can say that you can also have the mainstream approach. I would say, okay, so I would rather learn something which is mainstream, but in that case, I will still not go with Go, because then if you want to go mainstream and find a job as soon as possible, if there are still some job available, I hope so. Thank you. I will probably go in some other directions. Said that, I think that Go can be a very good programming language for doing these things. So if you want to be in the DevOps area, if you are a Docker fan like me, if you want to write some Docker, some Go tools, probably it's the best way. By the way, I'm currently working in a company. I am a head of DevRel at Zerops, and they have a CLI written in Go. And I'm also checking the code base. So this is the proof that Go can be used in a CLI, and it's fine. I also wrote a lot of Go code. I also have some Go videos somewhere over the internet.
Awesome. That's good to know. But Francesco, it also essentially boils down to deploying the services, right? By the way, I liked you showing that Docker bottle. I mean, you're a Docker captain, of course. Expert.
This is not sponsored by Docker, but I've been a Docker captain since 2021.
Yeah.
There is one of my favorite technologies ever. I would say that recently this company, Zerops, that I joined, they have a mind-blowing approach to deployment. Still learning it, but I would say I will always still be a fan. I mean, not of Docker itself, there's Docker, but like how we can deploy things in an easy way. So yes.
Maybe share a bit more light on how do you see Rust affecting build and deployment workflows?
I love this question because it's basically, it's like talking about like to a person who has two hobbies and you ask about like the two hobbies together, So taking pictures and going by motorbike, and then you ask taking pictures in a while you're doing a motorbike riding. So that's amazing. So you can do different things. I don't know if you want to go super in details in this, but for example, when you build a Rust application, you can either build this in a Docker image or on your own system, because in Rust you also choose the architecture. Rust has a great thing that creates executable binaries. If you do cargo build, if you do a cargo hello world, if you do a Rust hello world, if you do cargo build, you have an executable based on your operating system. I don't know if you heard it right. So it does mean that if you type cargo build on a basic Rust project, you have a cargo.exe on Windows, and the executable on Mac and executable on Linux. Of course, you can also change by tuning the compiler the type of architecture. So I can even create an executable for Linux on Windows. Usually, when you are talking about deployment, of course, we want Linux, of course, a Linux application. For example, if you build the executable of Rust in a Docker container, you can do this natively that runs on a Linux machine. If I build a Rust executable on my Windows machine, it will be for Windows. And then, yes, I can change it, of course, but then I have the problem that running it on my own Windows machine, it might be a problem. So usually my flow is that I prefer to build the Rust binary directly when I build the Docker image. So I have something which is just deployable everywhere in a Linux executable running in a Docker container. That's the dream.
Again, that's a really helpful insight. At the same time, are there benefits? You did talk about it a little bit, but are there benefits to shipping Rust services like smaller container images, faster startup, lower runtime overhead that op teams usually appreciate?
Yes, of course. Binaries is the dream of the operations because they is the most lightweight. If you have a binaries, you can say, hey, maybe I don't even need the Docker anymore. That's not 100% true because if you have an executable, you still might have some dependencies. You might still have something, but in my experience, having an executable that is inside a Docker container is the best because I have something which is lightweight and can run everywhere where Docker is installed. So I have basically with just a bit overhead, but it's acceptable. Of course, if you need poor performance, you can even just run the executable, but usually the overhead that Docker gives you will get it 10 times more in terms of scalability and doing things, because maybe let's say, because yes, if you want to deploy a single service, maybe you don't even need Docker. If I put a cargo.executable file on the Linux server, it's fine. If you need to orchestrate 10 services, what do? You deploy it, you run this, and how do you physically run these 10 times on the same machine? I think it's doable. In that case, having this service in a container, of course, we're talking about scalability. We're talking about production grade applications, not your side projects that runs on your MacBook on Saturday. So if you have an application that has to scale to 10,000 people, to a million of people, having that in a replaceable environment is a nice idea because we're not in the 90s anymore. And so that's very useful. Again, in the last 2 months, working at Zerops, we are working on something super cool. But let's say for now, the idea of containers that can scale, it's still the best. But we'll see in the future what will happen. Yes. And thank you, Caitlin. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
And also at the same time, I mean, you did talk about high availability and scalability. What use cases in web development do you find Rust actually excels at?
When the performance is really important for you. If performance is not the most important thing for you, probably you can go with more like default things. For example, I'm still a huge fan of Node.js, for example. If you need pure performance, probably in that case is when Rust really starts to shine. I'll show you now that we can even rewrite web applications in Rust. You can just ask Opus 4.6. Probably it will give something as output. I would still recommend to learn something, at least watch one of my free videos before doing this crazy stuff. But yes, so this is where it really shines. And also, again, I really also like when you need something which is well structured. And again, Riverdi said that when you have, bottleneck, you have a service which is very slow compared to the rest, and then you would love that, I don't know, the login or whatever. You need a service that is really impacting. And usually, from my experience, all the systems are like that. It's like when you have a class, there is always that person who is slowing everyone down. It's similar. So we have a system. There's always one service that, for some reason, maybe has some long processing. He has to do 100 HTTP requests. Don't ask me why. So in that case, usually there is a service that is slower than everyone else by far. Sometimes it's not the service fault. Maybe it's the service asking, making an HTTP request that in that case is not the service fault. Sometimes how the service does work, it is slowing the entire system. And this is very bad. And so in that case, probably spending some time to optimize it in Rust, it does make sense. Rewriting the whole application in Rust, I think that unless you start from scratch, it's not necessary for 80% of the projects, unless you really want to have fun with Rust. So to answer your question is when you see a bottleneck or when you need really high performance.
Thank you. We only have 9 minutes remaining, so I want to make most of this time. Quickly, if you could just talk very briefly about any challenges integrating Rust into CI/CD pipelines or monitoring, maybe.
Yeah, okay, yes. The challenge here, it might be that since it has been used for less time compared to other languages, there might be less examples. Even the AI might be a bit slower now. Maybe in a couple of years this probably will disappear, but since this is a newer programming language, and probably there are for sure standards. Maybe for some specific technologies, maybe you are using specific technology, you're using something specific, and then in that case, the documentation for Rust, it might be lagging a bit. So that's the cons that you get if you get a new language. You get some new benefits, like for example, for fearless concurrency. If I want to write monitoring in JavaScript, I know that I will find it. That's, I'm sure, 100%. In Rust, I might, but you can fill that gap with your own knowledge. You can buy my book, or we can check videos, or you can use AI, or you can do all of them if you want. So probably in that case, it might not be as easy as in JavaScript to integrate. Sometimes we have this problem even with TypeScript. So sometimes, maybe the JavaScript application has a better example. At least this was true some years ago. I remember me trying to integrate PayPal in payments. I think it was 10 years ago. The example in TypeScript was not working because we were lacking the examples. An example in JavaScript just worked. So we had the whole application in TypeScript and this part in JavaScript because for the payment in PayPal, it worked because we had the JavaScript example. So maybe this problem probably has been fixed. I was doing this on Stack Overflow some years ago. So probably now you can do PayPal integration with TypeScript in half a minute. But this is just to give an example of how sometimes not having updated documentation on a language, it might be a problem. But these problems usually tends to disappear. So we will see. We'll see in the future. Yeah. What do you mean by struggling with the ecosystem?
I mean, there can be sometimes problems with particular frameworks, right? When some new developers are adopting Rust, okay, or tool chains, perhaps you might recommend, because initially there is a lot of trial and error, a lot of experiments as well. So you being an experienced person in Rust, what would you suggest to someone who is new?
Yes, my approach has always been the same. So I will say that always go with something which is mainstream, which is even more true in case of Rust. So I would go with a framework which is well known. Please check all the crates because they are basically public, them all. So I would say use even existing third-party libraries and frameworks, but of course giving always a check. I would say that this is a rule of the whole internet. Don't download the random packages and random stuff from the internet in general. So be careful, but I will say that the Rust ecosystem and toolchain is famous for being one of the favorite ones. Of course, once you get used to it, it's mind-blowing how easy it is and how they made it so well. The integration, for example, I don't know, for test, for example, is mind-blowing. If you compare the way to test your code in Rust compared to JavaScript, JavaScript is a mess. And it's about testing, but it's not JavaScript's fault. It's that there is too much choice. You have to choose a library. You have to choose which library. You have to choose when to add a library. You have to choose, the version of the library. In Rust, you type cargo test and it's done. So it's integrated in the toolchain. It almost makes me want, to write tests. Probably I use AI anyway. But this is a huge approach, and this is one of the points that I discussed in my talk. Rust is not hard to learn, because part of learning a language is learning the toolchain. Part of learning a language is to learning the ecosystem.
Yeah,
I promise. Francesco pinky swear that in Rust you will find everything easy and amazing. It might be, you might not trust your eyes on how easy it is, and you would say, no, this is not possible because I'm used to do something way more complicated, or that I have to choose. The fact you don't have to choose and you have a standard is refreshing, I would say. In terms of dependencies, you just have cargo. You don't have to choose npm, yarn, pm, and then you have 3 versions for in each readme.md. I've been there, so I still do that. It's fine. Probably you know what I'm talking about. Maybe for a junior, this is a bit exhausting. Maybe for a person who is new to JavaScript, understanding, they go on a code base, they see npm, but they decided to use yarn, and then say what's going on. Of course, once you become an expert, you don't even need the tutorials anymore. You just do your own things. But learning the toolchain in Rust is famous for being one of the strong points of Rust, of course.
Yeah, great. I'm sure people who are listening here find it really helpful. Thank you. Talking a little bit about community, especially Rust in the kernel and beyond. The Linux kernel maintainers have declared that Rust is here to stay in the kernel, and even plan for components that require Rust going forward. So, what do you think about that endorsement? How does that impact Rust's trajectory? Does it signal a tipping point for a broader adoption across industries?
It's great news and very bad news for Rust haters. So that's probably. But I would say of course, we can have fights, we can share memes, we can we can talk about Rust versus Zig all day long. But the truth, this is objective, is that Rust is slow in getting adopted on a bigger system. Even if you go on the government side or the DARPA things, you can check the news. Slowly it's becoming the standard. I think even in some military system in government, when security is really something important, just the fact that Rust can be used in the Linux kernel, it's already mind-blowing. Even if the experiment would have failed, it would have been a success anyway. This is an incredible success for the popularity of the language. We can talk about a language like if they were a sports team, because this is what developers do. We like to talk like if it were at a pub, and then we say Rust is better than JavaScript, JavaScript is versus the Python. But in reality, language is a tool. People will use what they find useful. And of course, the community is always important, but this is a clear signal that probably, I don't know, Sakib, but probably spending 1 hour to learn Rust instead of spending 1 hour debating if you should use Rust or Go is better. If you have 2 hours, instead of debating 2 hours, you dedicate 1 hour to learn Rust, 1 hour to learn Go. Probably this will make you a better engineer. So that's my point of view. And all of these are signals. When I'll be happy, Sakib? When they will not talk about this anymore. When we will just say, let's just do it. So because now we are in this phase when Rust needs validation. Right? We need to talk. Should we or not? Nobody's saying like, should you use Python? Say, okay, if you want to use it. Nobody's having these conversations. I'll be happy when we will focus on building the things, and Rust will be accepted as a reality. Because it is. Again, if you are happy with your tools, if you don't feel like learning something new because you feel overwhelmed, it's absolutely fine. I got excited about Rust and Enthusiast 3-4 years ago. I started sharing my experience with it. I think I convinced many people to at least start learning it. And I think that so far, nobody ever sent me a DM like, Francesco, you said to learn Rust, and then I got absolutely disappointed. I got the opposite feedback. So if people are scared about me, they never say this, but this never happened. Of course, after this one, I will get a message of someone trolling me like about this. But the idea is that I think that learning something new is always a nice experience. So if you learn something new, it might be useful. I think that learning a programming language is a nice bet for your career. So this is my honest thought. I try to be as transparent as possible, and so that's it.
Great. That's really helpful in the end. I do want to ask two more questions about future domains and improvements, but because our time is up over here, I want to give this chance also to people who are watching us and listening to us. So thank you for bearing with me. This is my first time hosting a live interview for Deep Engineering, so I appreciate your patience. Thank you so much, Francesco. Good. So now I think we can head to the question and answers and take one question. We do have, I think, one question from someone over here. All right. With the state of the industry right now, you don't think it could be challenging for a junior developer to find a first job in Rust to start their journey?
I will say, with the state of the industry right now, I think it is challenging for a junior developer to find a job anyway. So I would remove Rust from this question. So maybe Rust is not the problem here. I think you can have two approaches here, Anthony and Ridolfi. I don't know if you're Italian, your surname sounds Italian. You can have two approaches here, and I think both of them might work. One is to go as mainstream as possible, trying to get the most used framework, I don't know, React, and trying to get a job where there are more jobs. What is the problem here? You know where I'm going. The problem is that probably the other 5 million of people are already looking for that React job because it's very popular. I prefer to go another way. So I prefer to say, okay, since there are fewer people yet still that know Rust, probably it's worth learning. You know what, Anthony? Now we are living in a moment when we really can't stop. You probably will need to learn Rust, JavaScript, Python, even Ruby. And of course, you can learn a lot. You can use books, you can use videos and so on. I would say probably, and I was one of the people who were advocating for just becoming strong in a technology and then get a job in a technology. I don't know if this is still true, because nowadays AI, basically you can even learn 3 things at the same time. It probably is not recommended, but I would say that probably at this moment you should be very flexible. You should be ready. What I would say is that if you find a job description and it has JavaScript, SQL, Docker, because why not? Kubernetes, because why not? And then it also mentions Rust. And there are 2 candidates, and one of them knows Rust. That might be the extra thing that might get you the job. That's my point of view. The phase when we learn just a single technology, I think, is over, but it was over like 10 years ago. So I would say that probably learning, or at least dedicating some time to understand the basics of Rust, might make you shine in the job interview. This is my approach.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. Thank you so much, Francesco. Yeah, I'll mark it as answered. We don't have any other question right now, so I'll continue asking questions. But I would encourage our viewers to ask questions. Put them in the question and answer box, please. Francesco, looking ahead, future domains and improvements, where do you see the next big thing growth for?
Yeah, I think the big things, it might be in the web development, so I'm a bit unpopular in this, because web development has already a big adoption, but probably now it's not the first framework or the first language you think about to write web development, I think. Yet we are in 20th of March 2026. The thing is that I'm seeing many companies, and I don't know why they reach out to me telling me like, hey Francesco, we are writing our service in Rust. I'll say, yes, good for you, but probably because they see me doing like Rust stuff over the internet, so they literally send me DMs, notifying me that they are changing their backend in Rust. I don't know why this is happening. This probably they want to make me happy and just sending me a signal that something is changing. And I'm talking about companies that has hundreds of developers. I'm not talking about a person just doing this on a random Saturday night. This probably I get this news before everyone else. I get this news because I'm well known for talking about Rust and being quite vocal about it. So I think this is where will happen the biggest change, because in terms of embedding, I think Rust is already winning hands down. I even stopped advocating for it, because now there is no need to advocate for it anymore. Probably in embedding, Rust already reached what I mentioned. Like for example, you didn't ask me like on Rust on embedding if it's good or not, because probably it is. So there is no need to discuss this anymore. Then the next big wave might be on the backend. The thing is that we need some very solid backend frameworks in Rust. I think I started with Actix and Rocket. Now I'm a big fan of Axum. So I'm using that. I will probably now use Axum in production if I ever create a SaaS, create a program, project, which was not true 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I said, okay, Rust is good for backend, but probably I will not use it if I had, a paid product. Now, if I had a paid product, I will let's remove the probably. I would use that because I think it's mature. In 2026. 2025, I don't know. In 2024, no. And I am one of the most skeptical developers in the world. if I trust something, it's because I am 100% sure. Otherwise, I would not advocate in this way just to try something. I am probably the most skeptical developer in this room. I will probably I will bet on this. If I had $100, I would put them on the web development backend frameworks. This will be my bet. Let's see.
Interesting. You did mention embedded systems. I think we have been actually like seeing a lot of interest in those areas and IoT, with efforts to make Rust viable for safety critical systems, and even some incursions into data science and AI tooling. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I had on my channel another Docker captain who is created a project called the Echo Kit, and it's basically ESP32. I can't remember the exact acronym. The small device, and it runs a web server in Rust when you get the device at home. So it basically comes an embedded with an embedded also software, power word intended, and this is the proof that you can use it in a good way. And again, here usually it has been the field of C++. Usually here.
Yeah.
And now I see many people, but not just random junior developers, people who sell systems on embedding services and embedding devices that use Rust to sell these devices, which is a bit of a different story. It's like having, the producers of these embedding devices, they are putting Rust by default on their systems before selling them. So that's a clear sign that it's not just about a random person trying to put Rust on an embedded device. It's people who are actually making profit of selling these devices. They want to have Rust as a default, which might also sound as a bit unpopular, but maybe they find it useful. So, and this is a real proof. Yeah. So that's it. Also, it's funny because I met this person, and he's also a Docker captain. He also runs Rust with Docker. So I also had him on my channel because it was a very interesting conversation, I would say.
Interesting. You knocked off a lot of my questions, and you did talk about improvements in Rust language and libraries as well. But I just want to ask you, since you are active in the domain and prolific author as well, what are things that you're excited about? For example, you think that will also help going forward the community? For example, better GUI support, more ergonomic async patterns, perhaps.
Yes. So I think there is still some work to do, but we are getting there. I'm about, after this live event, to collaborate with a guy that is creating like sort of shell CN for Rust. So we are working on that part for sure. And I think that's super, super exciting. So yes, I think the future is really bright in terms for Rust. I see zero signals of it stopping, but I just see a more and more, let's say, wide adoption, and this makes me happy because it also took me. I made a bet on Rust in 2023. Was screaming. I don't want to say in the void, but let's say 2023 probably Rust was not as popular as it is now. So I'm happy that I made this decision because it was based on how skeptical I was and I still am. So probably yes, seeing a wider adoption. Basically every day I see a good news about Rust, and every time, of course, I post it saying like, okay, another day, another Rust W, another Rust win. And now it's basically, now I do this almost every day, let's say 5-6 times per week. And and so the future is bright. It's again, I would like to really differentiate between having fun, if you want to have fun about the memes and so on. But I think that also there should be the professional approach, especially in this era when we really need to understand what's going on. We need efficient languages. We can't play anymore. Maybe 20 years ago we could just play around with stuff. Now we need to be really on point. We need to know different technologies. It can feel overwhelming, but this is the truth. This is how it is our developer life. This is the career that we choose for us. But I think there is still space for developers. There is still let's say, opportunities in terms of jobs, careers, but we need to be very open-minded. Don't just say, no, I don't want to learn Rust because an influencer told me to don't do that. Just try it with your eyes, try it with your hands, and then you decide. Trust no one and try to learn something. And who knows, maybe you will like it, Maybe you will not, but at least you will know. I mean, I even tried the pineapple on pizza once. Of course, I didn't like it, but at least I tried. So why don't we give it a try?
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, Francesco. I would like to take this moment to see if anyone has any questions before we wrap our session.
Italian family, yeah, but French. Ah, you are French, Anthony. Okay, cool, cool. We can still be friends. You know, there is a famous beef between Italian and French, but it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's fine. Nice, nice. Yeah. I would like to say thank you to everyone who came here. Thanks also to you. You allowed me to rant a lot. But I think in the end, the best thing we can do is to take action, learn something. I mean, you can take the book or watch videos, but do something, because we really can't stop in this era. I don't know when we'll stop, probably never, when we will retire. But I still believe that there is value in learning how to code, because this is what will make you different compared to someone else. No, someone is telling you, learning code is not worth it anymore because everybody can code. But this is like saying you should not learn how to cook professionally because now everybody can cook. I would say the opposite. Since now the tool are, let's say, digitized, the people who have the knowledge will always be better of the people who has not. And probably if you had the lack of learning programming even before AI, one sees this as something bad. I see this as something good because I had the opportunity to learn these concepts before AI, and now I'm applying it. And now probably I can, if I have a nice idea, I can probably create a real-world applications in hours. In a couple of years, it will be minutes. In 10 years, it will be seconds. I don't know, but that's the trend. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, it does. Well, I think we should wrap, but before wrapping, maybe you could give us in 1 minute. You did give a lot of insights for engineers over here and encouragement as well. What is it that most people don't know? A message you would like to give experienced engineers who are on the fence about Rust in terms of what Rust future holds and why it's still, why it is actually worth being part of.
I don't know what you don't know. You are watching this. I will say that I think that Rust is worth learning because it has unique features. So probably I think exploring unique features might be even funny, I would say. So in my case, I think we almost forgot that probably learning programming might also be funny. So probably exploring especially the way Rust handles memory, it might be even a fun experience. So this is what I would like to say. But anything else, I would say I would leave this up to you. I would say let's just hold on. Let's not just let AI win and just do everything without disconnecting our brain. That will be a very bad choice for our career. So, and I think Rust can be your ally in this, because it can help you to write performance applications also with a great developer experience. So you should try it out and see. We are no more in an era, when something, is scary or is like secret. I mean, there is free content. There are also books and stuff. So just try it out and you will see if this is worth it. And if you like it, of course, let me know. Tag me in a post. I got this very often, like people, telling like, Francesco, thanks for this. It is a great choice. I got this role because I started learning Rust with your book. So this really, makes my day a bit better. So if this ever helped you in any possible way, let me know, because we are here for this. We are here to support each other and help the developer community in this very tough moment for us. Thanks also for what you are doing. So we should talk more. No, we should do the opposite of isolating ourselves, feeling the AI anxiety. We should do the opposite. Give out, even if you are a bit shy. So you mentioned that this is your first podcast, but you handled very professional. This is a great moment to really come out and share as much as possible, work on your communication skills, work on all the skills that you didn't know that you needed when you started learning programming. That's it. I hope that you will have another session at some point to see if I was right or wrong. So next time you will say, see, Francesco, you were wrong. And I will be happy to say, yes, I was. No problem in that case. Thanks everyone for coming. You should also, subscribe to the Substack link. I think we share this here. So why not share it? Because this might be very useful for you. Subscribe to this channel because I've seen many And I think this video will be put on YouTube. So if you are watching this on YouTube,
Eventually.
subscribe now, because this will be recorded. So yes, thanks for having me.
Great. Thank you so very much, Francesco. We'll wrap here. Really appreciate Francesco for the depth and honesty throughout the conversation, and thank you to everyone in the audience for being there and also asking questions. A couple of things before we go. If you want more kind of content, as Francesco also mentioned, thank you for suggesting, by the way, Deep Engineering. Please subscribe to Deep Engineering. It's free. It goes out every Thursday, and we will include a link also in the follow-up email. And if you want to go deeper on what Francesco covered today, please check out the Rust Programming Handbook. It's available on the website. I will also share the link over here. Yeah, and just look for an email from all of us at Packt, Deep Engineering. Thank you for joining. We hope to see you at the next one. Thank you.
Perfect. And if you ever meet me in person, you can also ask me to sign up that for free. I'll do this as a free service. It's happening quite often now, so that might be a great plus. It's basically an excuse to have a nice chat about Rust. But that's it. Thanks for having me. It has been a very nice.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Francesco.
Bye.